Hi there. It's Wednesday, and I'm very happy to have you. I have the great David Daley joining me. He's got the cover story at the New Republic and all of the latest that you need to know on the redistricting and gerrymandering scam. And I also have my appearance on Francesca Fiorentini's very popular YouTube show yesterday as I tagged on to today's show for you. So, little bonus, my guest appearance. I thought it went pretty well. We had some laughs if you want to listen to that. But my conversation with David Daley begins at 34 minutes, and then my appearance on Francesca's show starts at 1 hour, 14 minutes. I always like to tell you that in case you want to jump ahead, but I have got your news recap, headlines, and clips, what I call the shit show. That coming up right now.
It's Pete's Headlines and Clip Show. Get in on the shit show.
Thank you, John Carroll, as always, johncarroll.org. And now it's time to get to it. Don't forget, can't do any of it without you. Patreon.com/PeteDominic. It's ad-free, so I just have to plug the subscriber link. Patreon.com/PeteDominic. Send me your vitamin N pictures. Get outside. I'll be headed into the woods with Zats in just a little while, but let's get to it. Let's see. What do we have? Well, first of all, the Ayatollah Inhumani released a frenetic late-night posting binge, flooding Truth Social with more than 160 posts in less than 5 hours overnight 2 nights ago. Wild spectacle. Saw him teeing off on political opponents and policies. He also reposted an endless stream of clips, some of which were duplicated in what appeared to be an automatic loop, amplifying MAGA-friendly pundits and conspiracy theories. It's just a kind of behavior that you can't possibly understand why he's doing it. Talked about it a little bit with Francesca coming up, but clearly a distraction and also a madman, in case anybody's wondering, an absolute madman. Among them was a clip of Alex Jones featuring Bed Bath & Beyond founder Patrick Byrne, whose video carried the bizarre caption, Michelle Obama may have used Biden's auto pen in the final days of his disastrous administration to pardon key individuals. So, I don't know. I mean, what world do they live in? They also posted what appeared to be an AI-generated video of Elon Musk discussing dear leaders vowed to immediately revoke temporary protections for Somali migrants despite the late night. But you can tell he's a human, believe it or not, didn't get a lot of sleep. Because then yesterday he had this cabinet meeting and Rip One Van Winkle was falling asleep all the time. He was real sleepy during the cabinet meeting yesterday, where the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, denied having any involvement or knowledge in the second strike that killed survivors in the water back in September. During that strike, he threw his military commanders under the bus. Also, Kim Jong-un also said about Somali immigrants, they contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country. I'll be honest with you. So one of the most blatantly racist, horrific things he's ever said, but then he says those things every day. So hard to believe. Another big story from last night was what happened in Tennessee's special election. The Republican there won as expected. A lot of people had their hopes up that Democrat would have a surprise victory, and she came real close and made up a huge margin from the 2024 elections, where Scammy Davis Jr., he carried the seat by 22 points, and now the Republican Matt Van Epps won the seat by 9 points. Both parties poured millions into what should have been a sleepy special election to replace Republican Mark Green. But Republicans clinging to a narrow House majority, Democrats riding momentum from November victories. Well, the contest became a high-stakes preview of next year's midterm battles. But a single-digit loss is still a huge gain for Democrats, is how it's being looked at. Affordability remains central. There's a path for Republicans on the issue. Will they take it? Also worth mentioning AOC, not the political boogeyman she once was. She and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett both went and campaigned for Democratic State Rep Afton Ben, who was the candidate. Also, so did Kamala Harris and Al Gore and plenty of others. Wait, Al Gore is still out there campaigning? Oh, interesting to see. And redistricting, big gamble for Republicans. I'll talk about it more with David Daley, but these results came out after our interview yesterday. Writing over at Mad Owl Blog, Sydney Carruth writes, amid a nationwide redistricting arms race ahead of the midterms, Tennessee's heavily gerrymandered 7th Congressional District offered a look at the potential pitfalls of redrawing these congressional maps to pad a Republican House majority. When you eliminate a Democratic district, you necessarily dilute heavily red seats, which have to absorb those voters. And Tuesday offered a warning. In a wave election, that could backfire big time, given a Democratic candidate who's the right fit for the district. Like to see it. Just a couple takeaways from the Tennessee special election and real interesting outcome there. And I've got more headlines for you, including this very upset one. RFK Jr. has tapped a preacher who blames vaccines for cancer and compared COVID tracking to Nazi Germany. The guy's name is Kirk Milhoan. And he claimed without evidence that the COVID-19 shots caused spikes in cancer and miscarriages. And now guess what? He's helping shape the country's vaccine policy. Gizmodo writes, the clown car that is America's public health under Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has gotten wackier. The newest chair of the CDC's vaccine advisory panel, Kirk Milhoan, is a pediatric cardiologist and preacher with a history of making incredible claims about the dangers of vaccination. So there you go. That's great. He was first appointed this September as part of the second round of new members inducted under the reign of RFK Jr. as HHS chief. And don't worry, the worst is yet to come, they say. Unfortunately, reality is in short supply over at HHS these days. And this guy and the rest of RFK Jr.'s buddies on the vaccination board are set to make things worse, a lot worse for the country soon enough. So make sure you have good doctors and make sure your friends do as well. They haven't outlawed vaccines just yet. So get vaccinated, especially for this flu and COVID winter if you haven't already. Now, going back to Count Flatula's Nazi-like remarks yesterday in the Oval, or rather in the White House cabinet meeting, where a lot of people there obviously appeared to applaud his horrible comments that he made about Somalians and third world countries, all that shit he's been saying. Well, now policy went into place. Heather Cox Richardson writes, tonight the administration put Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem's policy into place, pausing all immigration applications from 19 countries and halting the process of green cards and citizenship applications. God, how terrible must it be if your application for a green card or citizenship from any of those countries was halted in the process. Anyway, federal authorities say now that they will target Somalian immigrants in Minneapolis-St. Paul in an upcoming sweep. Although the executive director of the Minnesota chapter of Council on American Islamic Relations says about 95% of the Somalis in Minnesota are already U.S. citizens, but 50% were born in the U.S. According to the Associated Press, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry says that Trump's attacks on Somalis violates the moral fabric of what we stand by in this country as Americans. They've started businesses and created jobs. They've added to the cultural fabric of what Minneapolis is. Minneapolis police, many of them Somali themselves, will not work with the federal officials in the sweep. So a really important place to watch, and let's see how that policy plays out in Minneapolis, and make friends with some Somalis if you can. I'm got to try to find somebody to have on the show to talk about that community and humanize them, to confront and contradict the dehumanization that we're hearing from Hippo POTUS and the rest of his minions. Also yesterday, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who is the former Honduran president, was officially pardoned and released from federal prison while serving a 45-year sentence for drug trafficking and conspiracy to traffic weapons in the U.S. He served less than 2 years of his sentence. Immigration attorney Aaron Reichlin-Melnick posted, Juan Orlando Hernandez isn't just a drug lord. He's a murderous drug lord. Among the things he was accused of doing was having a former ally hacked to death with a machete while in prison because he was afraid the man would rat him out. Well, guess what? Trump just freed him. So that was a big story yesterday, worth watching. And, of course, Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, doesn't know anything about the pardon, doesn't have an opinion on it. Huh, how convenient. What else do I have for you here? I thought this was a great story, an important story, and reason to support Costco. They are suing the Trump administration for a refund of tariffs that they've paid, that we as customers or members, I'm a member, have paid on imported goods. This is a big deal. I mean, I don't know if it will happen, but I love what they're doing, and they have the support of lots and lots of people who could potentially get money back. That'd be crazy. The Pope celebrated a waterfront mass in Beirut, Lebanon, near the site of an explosion that killed hundreds of people 5 years ago, capped his first international trip as head of the Roman Catholic Church. At the Supreme Court yesterday, justices heard arguments over an attempt by New Jersey's Attorney General to subpoena crisis pregnancy center records. A majority of the justices appeared supportive of arguments that it should be able to challenge a subpoena from the state's attorney general and federal court. Abortion rights advocates have argued that such organizations mislead women seeking abortions. The offices often look similar to medical facilities for pregnant women, featuring signs offering ultrasounds and literature describing pregnancy tests. But, of course, they actually exist to dissuade women from ending their pregnancies. We've talked about these many times here on the show. But if the clinics win, it could clear the way for them to continue their First Amendment challenge to the federal courts. If they lose, it could limit their ability to challenge the subpoena, at least until further state court action in New Jersey and elsewhere. Those are the headlines I've got for you today. Now let's get to the clip show part of the shit show. Quick shout out to longtime listener and new subscriber Mark Ball, who just signed up for a paid subscription at patreon.com/PeteDominic and wrote, "Hey Pete, love what you do. Finally in the place to support you financially. Please do not stop. We need your voice and the voices of your guests now more than ever. Thank you for sticking to your principles, continuing to engage and forcing us to think critically. I skip over the news segments fairly frequently to help regulate my emotions, but I always tune into your interviews, so keep them coming. Hope you're getting some downtime as we wrap up the year and prepare for a full court press in 2026. Thank you for being you." Mark, I see you, I hear you, and I really appreciate you. And everybody else, I am so grateful for your support, and it's great to have Mark signing up. Much appreciated. All right, let's get to the clips. Let's start with some comedy, shall we? A little Jimmy Kimmel from his monologue last night.
Oh, we're sending warm wishes to those of you in the path of the cold winter storm. It was snowing in Washington today, and there was a blizzard last night, an avalanche of angry posts on Truth Social from guess who? Guess who? Our president, I know I've said this before, but for real, this time he went completely off the rails last night. The man who is allegedly running the country banged out an onslaught of posts and reposts in a furious social media blitzkrieg that started at 7:09 p.m., went on nonstop until almost midnight. From 7 to 12, he posted 160 times. It's an average of every 2 minutes for 5 hours straight. You want to see what that looks like? I'll show you what that looks like, because it's quite... This is it. That's what he did last night. Do you know how long you have to be on the toilet to post that much? I mean, what is he eating? And the posts themselves were all over the place. Obama, Biden, sedition, Christmas. And you can tell he was watching Fox News, because at one point he inquired about getting a reverse mortgage on the White House. One of his posts was a clip from his cameo in Home Alone 2, which I sincerely believe is the last time Donald Trump was happy. And after this tweeting frenzy, he passed out, was back at it at 5:48 a.m., declaring Truth Social is the best. There is nothing even close. I don't know. I still think chlamydia is better, but that's just me.
All right. Good way to get us started. And now let's head over to Colbert, because he was hosting Rachel Maddow, and they were talking about, illegal orders from leadership and what that means. So I thought it might be worth sharing that, because she wrote a book about it and is smart about it. And I'm not a huge Rachel Maddow fan, but can't deny that she's a smart and great communicator. And here it is.
Several members of Congress, all veterans, put out a video saying, just a reminder that the Uniform Code of Military Justice says that you not only can disobey a illegal order, but that you should disobey an illegal order. That's taught in Officer Training Corps.
Yes.
The president's response to that was to call it seditious behavior. If I'm paraphrasing here, no, seditious behavior punishable by all caps death. Do you know of any precedent in American history where the president called for the execution of sitting members of Congress?
I do not. It's not just bad about the Trump administration. It's also a tragedy for members of the military who are being put in between a rock and a hard place, because members of the military will follow the orders of civilian leadership. It's a really important part of who we are as a country. But when those orders are illegal, they're put in the position of having to parse what to do. And there's no good answer. What the military tells them to do is to not obey illegal orders. But here's the Secretary of Defense and the president effectively saying, well, if I said it, it's not illegal. It just puts It puts Admiral Bradley at this special operations. It puts everybody involved in those strikes in a disastrous position where they may be charged with war crimes or with murder for doing something that Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth told them to do. And that's not fair to our members in the military.
All right, a little bit of Rachel Maddow talking to Stephen Colbert on CBS's The Late Show. Now let's head over to a very, very popular podcaster named Jennifer Welch, who got called out by Stephen Miller's wife on CNN because Welch, had called Stephen Miller a Nazi in the past. Well, Jennifer Welch wanted to correct the record, so she went on and...
For the permanent record, I want to say it again. Yes, I think Stephen Miller is a hateful white nationalist with Nazi ambitions. And I want to make sure I'm crystal clear about that. And I don't think that alone. Millions and millions and millions of Americans do. And Katie Miller, when you go to bed at night, and you tuck your kids in, at some point, your kids are going to know, oh, our parents are racist. Our parents don't give a shit about certain people. At some point, your lack of empathy when you love on your kids, if you can't transfer that empathy to other people because they look differently than you, or their origins are from a different country than you, and you can't transfer that, that's a level of psychopathy and sociopathy that I don't know can be treated other than being in a padded cell in a straitjacket, because that's how insane and cruel and mean I believe you and your husband are.
Damn, she said it. There you go. Not walking it back at all. In fact, tripling down. So I agree. I like it. Let's go now to CNN. They were hosting Indiana State Senator Republican Michael Boacek, who was deeply offended by the president's usage of the word retard. And he uses the R word, as do a lot of others. I clearly didn't just then, but try not to use the word myself. Told my daughters not to use the word, but it's become very in vogue and with this generation, I think I would argue, by the way, as well as a lot of other people. Well, Indiana State Senator Michael Boacek apparently has a child with special needs. And so here he was on CNN talking about it.
You know, I think sometimes we confuse campaign rhetoric with the speech you use while you're actually in office. And
by which he's saying you can say retard on the campaign trail, but now once you've been elected, come on.
Well, you get a little bit looser leash, so to speak, during a campaign season. Now is the time to govern. And when it seems quite clear that we're isolating a population by the loose use of a slur, at some point you have to speak out and make sure that that's known.
What was the slur that really sent you on this path to speak out very strongly against what you heard come out of the mouth of the president?
Sure, I'm not going to say the word. It's the R word. People know what it is, and it's a word that's used to denigrate the intellectually disabled community. My own daughter, as I expressed in my post, has Down syndrome. My wife works for Community Intellectual Development Center here in my district. Matter of fact, she was able to secure a grant for that district, a bipartisan grant several years ago, and now, of course, the folks that are trying to push me to vote for this are now have turned their anger at her, unfortunately. But it's at some point we have to stand up, and you can't validate slurs like that and rhetoric like that, because how do we expect our children to not use terms like this, to be respectful of each other, when the most powerful person in the world is using them? It just goes to a matter of character, and somebody has to speak up. And at this point, I have the microphone.
All right, he's not that brave. I mean, it's really, he's acting like music should come up behind him because he's calling out the president of the United States for saying that word. So I'm not going to give him too much credit. I'll give him a little credit. I'm sure he's now receiving lots and lots of death threats. And we'll see where he lands on his vote to redistrict and gerrymander Indiana's districts. And I think that's what matters. Well, we love Leslie Jones, the comedian, former SNLer, and she's had a great individual career, and she's also a contributor, I guess, to the Daly Show where this appeared. Our friend Karen Madison sent me this yesterday, so I figured I'd share it because it's worth it. We love Leslie, and I thought this is a hilarious and important message from her commentary.
Need to know, why does America have so much hatred for black people? Is it because when you see black people, you're reminded of the sins of this country? Is it because my ass is too fat? Is it because people need a scapegoat for their own shortcomings? Or is it because my ass is too fat? Is it because you're afraid that we're going to treat you like you treated us? And you know what? I know my ass is fat. Stop looking at my ass and listen to the words that are coming out my mouth. I'm going to be honest. You know what I think? I honestly think everyone, not just white people, are uneducated. Not stupid, just uneducated about black people. You've been fed false propaganda about black people since the beginning of time in books, music, TV, movies. That shit's powerful. Even I fall for it sometimes. I saw X-Men, and do you know how long I believe Halle Berry controlled the weather? But apparently, it's the Jews. Wait, is that propaganda too? Damn, y'all good.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Love that and wanted to share. Thanks, Karen, who sent that to me yesterday. Send me any of your clips or headlines or anything else, guest ideas, standupwithpete@gmail.com. You can also share them in the Discord platform. There's channels there, and they often get to me, or I see them. And now it's time to get to my next clip. This is Senator Chris Murphy. I usually say Scott Murphy, but I'll say it right this time, Senator Murphy. He's calling for Pete Hegseth to resign. I'm sure he will. I'm sure he'll resign and not instead threaten the senator. We'll see.
Pete Hegseth needs to resign. And if he doesn't resign, Donald Trump needs to fire him. He is a walking, talking national security embarrassment. He seems more interested in winning video pull-up contests than he does in protecting this nation. He's obsessed with the weight of his soldiers, the facial hair of his soldiers, not concerned with actually keeping the country safe. He's leaking classified information. He's banning reporters from the Pentagon. There's no mainstream outlet right now that is telling you, the American public, what's happening inside the Department of Defense. But maybe most egregious is what we learned in the last week, that Secretary Hegseth gave a grossly illegal order, an illegal order to kill everyone aboard this vessel in the Caribbean, an order that ended up with our military not just shooting at the boat, but then shooting at the human beings who were swimming from their lives amidst the wreckage. That is not allowed under U.S. law. It is deeply immoral. And we simply cannot protect this country adequately if we are a moral embarrassment in the eyes of the world, if we have a Secretary of Defense who is enthusiastically giving outright illegal orders to the chain of command below him. Every single day that Pete Hegseth is at the Department of Defense, this country is weaker. You are less secure. This last revelation about this grossly illegal order that he gave is just final confirmation that the United States cannot protect itself for one more day adequately with Pete Hegseth at the helm of the Department of Defense. He needs to resign, or Donald Trump needs to get rid of him today.
Yeah. Well done. Senator Rand Paul is more specific with what's wrong with what Hegseth is doing.
Have you seen any evidence that there were survivors? What intelligence have you seen?
I've been offered no briefings, and I think that's purposeful because I've been skeptical of this. So no briefings have been offered to me. We are asking for them. We are supportive of the Armed Services Committee looking into this. But this has been very selective in briefings that have been given to people, primarily given to people who are already apologists for the administration.
And do you have confidence in the Defense Secretary at this point?
I'm very, very concerned about an order that would say kill them all, kill them, after they've already been wounded, after they're drifting apart. But for some people, this is distinctly different, the second strike. I think both strikes are actually illegal. I don't think you can just name people and say, well, they've got drugs. Well, where's the proof? That's an allegation. And these people are 2,000 miles away. People don't realize these outboard boats have no capability of reaching America. It take them like 20 stops to refuel to get up here. In all likelihood, none of these boats are coming to America. It's a completely made up and false sense that, we're at war, we can do whatever we want, but if Congress wants to vote on it, no, we're not at war. So they're at war if they can do whatever they want with no oversight. But if Congress were to get involved with oversight, it's not a real war, it's just a war where we name people who we don't like, we call them terrorists, and then we kill them, and then if we see them floating around in the ocean, we then re-bomb them. It's a crazy system.
And here's a little bit more from Senator Rand Paul on Piers Morgan's show.
Number one, there is no fentanyl made in Venezuela. Not just a little bit. There's none being made in Venezuela. These are outboard boats that, in order for them to get to Miami, would have to stop and refuel 20 times. They're in all likely going to Trinidad and Tobago, which is an island right off of the coast of Venezuela. So there's a lot of reasons to be worried about this. But number one is the broader principle of when can you kill people indiscriminately? When you're at war. That's why when we declare war, it's supposed to be done by Congress. It's supposed to be thoughtful. It's supposed to be debated. And we're not supposed to do it willy-nilly. And then when you have war, you just kill people in the war zone. And even then there are rules of engagement. But interdicting drugs has always been a criminal activity and a criminal anti-crime sort of activity where we don't just summarily execute people. We actually present evidence and convict them.
All right, there you go. Rand Paul making a pretty damn good case on this, and he's been consistent. I will give him credit on that. I will, even though he's a climate denier and I think a racist and I think all kinds of other terrible things. I'm going to give him credit on that one when it comes to war crimes. All right, let's get now to next clip. It's Mark Elias of Democracy Docket. He was on television yesterday talking about the potential of Indiana redistricting. As I mentioned, I'm playing that senator earlier. And Mark Elias says, listen, if you do it, we're going to sue you and you lose. Here he is.
And we have seen this before. We have seen him ratchet up pressure bit by bit. Donald Trump is ratcheting up the pressure to try to force Republicans to do his bidding, to try to rig the 2026 elections. And we have seen this before. We have seen him ratchet up pressure on Republican state officials. We've seen him ratchet up pressure on Republicans in Congress. And more often than not, Nicole, they buckle. So, I'm hopeful that Indiana Republicans will stand up to him, but I'm also realistic about it. And my message to them is that if they pass an illegal map, they are going to get sued and they are going to lose.
All right, there you go. Mark Elias. And now Jake Tapper recapping the story about the former Honduran president, who's a real bad guy who just got out of jail. And I thought this is a good recap. I don't care if you like Jake Tapper or not. It's just a recap of the story. Any reporter could do it. This is the one I found. Here it is.
A man named Juan Orlando Hernandez was freed from United States Penitentiary Hazleton in West Virginia. Now, you may have heard of him. He's the former president of Honduras, and he had been sentenced in a U.S. criminal court to 45 years in prison for, according to prosecutors, quote, helping to facilitate the importation of an almost unfathomable 400 tons of cocaine to this country and billions of individual doses sent to the U.S. with the protection and support of the former president of Honduras. This act of clemency, this pardoning, this freeing of a man who received millions of dollars in bribes to help 400 tons of cocaine come to the United States comes at the same time that President Trump and the Pentagon are waging this war against narco traffickers allegedly coming from Venezuela. strikes, military strikes that are of questionable and debatable legality. So why on earth would President Trump do this? Well, here was his explanation on Air Force One.
The people of Honduras really thought he was set up and it was a terrible thing. He was the president of the country. And they basically said he was a drug dealer because he was the president of the country. And they said it was a Biden administration setup. And I looked at the facts and I agreed with them.
So President Trump is calling this a Biden administration setup. That is not accurate. In fact, this investigation into Hernandez started years ago during the Biden administration. But then Hernandez's own brother was arrested and prosecuted during the first Trump administration. And in fact, the prosecutor of Hernandez's brother was Emile Beauvais, who went on to become President Trump's own personal attorney and is now a judge appointed by President Trump. This idea that this was a Biden setup, there's no evidence for that at all. Now, what there is evidence for is that if you have a connection to somebody in Trump's inner circle, in this case, Roger Stone, who is an on and off again political advisor to President Trump, and you convince that person to reach out to Trump and say, hey, this was all just Biden lawfare. I didn't do anything wrong. He seems to be very inclined to listen to that argument regardless of the facts, regardless of the evidence. And now we have proof that regardless of the crime, because if drugs are really such a horrible issue in this country, and they are, why would you pardon somebody who helped to bring 400 million tons of cocaine and billions of individual doses of cocaine to the United States? As Republican Senator Bill Cassidy posted on X the other day, why would we pardon this guy and then go after Maduro for running drugs into the United States? Lock up every drug runner. Don't understand why he is being pardoned. Well, you're not alone, Senator Cassidy. There are a lot of people who do not understand why this happened. And the truth is, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't make a lot of sense indeed. Well, there you go. I thought that was a pretty good explainer. Sorry about Trump's voice being included in it. But now let's get back to the jokes before we get to my guest, David Daley. Let's head back to Jimmy Kimmel and the monologue from last night, where he took on the Trump cabinet.
What a cabinet. We have twice-baked RFK Jr., who is now embroiled in a sex and drug scandal with a reporter nearly 40 years his junior. Our Secretary of War is murdering unidentified civilians and trying to throw the admiral who is following orders under the boat. The director of the FBI is reportedly using a private jet for personal travel with his country music star girlfriend and delayed a murder investigation until somebody brought him a jacket, an FBI jacket that fit his little body. We've got the Attorney General turning the Justice Department into the Keystone Cops. We have a wrestling magnate running the Department of Education who wants to get rid of the Department of Education. Our head of Homeland Security somehow has made killing a puppy one of the least controversial things she's done. She's busy rounding up college girls and deporting them to God knows where. And our health care is in the vitamin supplement powered hands of Dr. Oz. They have better quality cabinets at IKEA. And they were all at the table today. They all showed up.
All right. There you go. That's it. That's what I've got for you. That's the shit show. That was hilarious. By the way, you should go watch that clip because Kimmel, they somehow superimpose him in the cabinet meeting wearing like a sailor's suit. The whole thing's hilarious and you got to watch it rather than necessarily just listen to it as I am here on the podcast. The audio version, you can watch the interviews mostly. They are at YouTube and Substack at Stand Up With Pete. If you subscribed to those two, it's a huge help. If you go subscribe, it's free. You can pay on Substack too if you want. But I still drive everybody to patreon.com/Pete Dominic. That is the place to go. Sign up today, and thank you very much. All right, my conversation with David Daley now. He has the cover story over at the New Republic, by the way. Very, very good. MAGA's state-by-state plot to butcher democracy is the title of it. He's the author, most recently, of Anti-Democratic Inside the Far Right's 50-Year Plot to Control American Elections. Also, the national bestseller, Ratfucked, Why Your Vote Doesn't Count, and Unrigged, How Americans Are Battling Back to Save Democracy. He is a senior fellow at FairVote, which is a nonpartisan champion of election reforms His journalism on redistricting, gerrymandering has appeared in every major news outlet in the country. Former editor-in-chief of Salon.com. We love anytime we get to talk to David. He explains it all. Again, you can watch this on youtube.com/StandUpWithPete. Let's do it right now with David Daley. Lots to talk about in terms of this article. It's so important what you're writing about here. I'm going to get to it in a minute, but I just got to get your take because you're a real smart guy. You have done and seen it all and covered it all in a number of different media outlets. You've authored books about democracy and so on. So I just wanted to get your general take on the state of things before, obviously, we get to elections and gerrymandering and redistricting. The state of our politics, given the midterm elections, given the Mamdani win in New York, what that means for Democrats, and then the fact that he sat down with our commander in chief who looked at him like the proudest son he'd never had. What are your thoughts on kind of where we're at today, David?
It's a wild moment, isn't it? I think what we are watching in real time is Donald Trump becoming perhaps the most unpopular president in American history. His popularity numbers are cratering. They're down into the mid-30s right now. This is really uncharted territory. His coalition on the Hill, if you look closely, there's signs that it might be cracking a bit. You know, there is talk about investigating his Secretary of Defense for war crimes with these boats in the Caribbean. And it's not just Democrats saying this, right? It's a number of Republicans in the House and the Senate are deeply concerned about who gave these orders to kill these unarmed, folks on boats that, according to the federal government are, dangerous narco terrorists when they're actually letting the actual narco terrorists like the former president of Honduras walk out of jail today with a Donald Trump pardon. I think as Americans see the affordability crisis, but then they also see a massive grand ballroom being built on the grounds of the White House that just seems to get bigger and bigger. I think we've all waited for years for the moment when the reality of this guy's grift was going to break through to the American people. And maybe it's finally happening. The grift, the dangerous ineptitude and incompetence as we watch what Bobby Kennedy is doing and childhood diseases that had been eradicated slowly beginning to rear their head in red states that have walked back vaccine mandates. I think Americans are getting a glimpse at what Donald Trump and his band of crooks and cronies and grifters has in mind. And I think perhaps it's not what they had in mind.
There seem to be cracks, and you're seeing a whole bunch of Republicans now resigning, most high profile of which is Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a fire-breathing right-wing conspiracy theorist, white nationalist, and Trump sycophant. And if it's Epstein files or overall unpopularity, whatever it is, you're seeing elected Republicans, either say, I'm out of here, or like, remember when Lindsey Graham did for 15 minutes on January 6th? He's like, I'm out of here. I'm back. But they're turning away from him, maybe investigating him, realizing they got to cut their losses with this guy for their next election, for their political future, or maybe, God forbid, for their own conscience. And if the Republicans in Congress turn against him, criticize him, investigate his Secretary of Defense, that's a huge sea change. And before the midterm elections that we may or may not have free or fair.
He's not going to be on the ballot in 2028. And I think a growing number of Republicans are realizing this, and they are realizing they're going to be on their own. And this is the first time, 2016, 2020, 2024, Trump has held this party in his hand for what will be essentially a dozen years come the next presidential election. And folks are getting ready for what that is going to look like. Now, I don't think we ought to be under any illusion that Trumpism is going to disappear. And certainly Republicans are going to continue to have a supermajority in the U.S. Supreme Court. They're going to continue to have big structural advantages in terms of holding on to the House and also the Senate. They're going to have big structural advantages in the Electoral College. Let's not blind ourselves to the reality here. But the movement that has elected Trump twice now is in danger of cracking up as those who would be its standard bearers, those who would be its leaders, or those who have simply waited in the wings for this moment begin to ponder what their next step is going to be.
That's exactly right. It would seem exactly right. That's what we're seeing happening. And if he's a lame duck, what does that mean? Also, it's worth mentioning just how bad they are at governing. We knew that. Republicans are always bad at governing. They're great at selling stuff. No one's better salesman than Trump. He's a grifter. He's by the way, the Trump phones that they made, did you hear the latest reporting? Like there's an NBC reporter and plenty of others bought those phones and followed up, and they said they'll be here soon. They ordered them in August, and their phone's still not here. It's certainly not manufactured in America like they said it was. The point being, what you're saying, the grift is in. Like it's starting to be seen by more and more people. Because they're not good at governing, they keep failing at big, high-profile things, including the targeted prosecutions of his enemies, Comey and Letitia James and others, and Alina Habba yesterday and Lindsey Halligan, they got thrown. They weren't put in the jobs legally the right way. Judges, including Trump judges, I think, were like, how are you even in this job? You don't even have, you got to go through certain steps. Those high profile failures, what do they mean for this administration? Because I'm glad they're not good at governing. I'm glad that they are putting inept, unqualified people in these important positions to carry out his insane orders.
Their incompetence is showing. And the incompetence is dangerous sometimes when it comes to RFK and vaccines or Hegseth at the Department of Defense. But, sometimes their incompetence has been a saving grace. And he has been so determined to prosecute these enemies. He wants them to experience a taste of what he felt over the years where there were multiple prosecutions into his conduct, whether it was his finances or whether it was January 6th. He has held these grudges. He's nurtured them. He has set forth to try to find prosecutors who would do his bidding. And when he finally found them, and that took a while because these cases are such an embarrassment, it's such a shame on the Department of Justice that would bring them. But the people that he found, have been arrived out of a clown car. And even Trump judges can see this and won't tolerate it. There are some positive moments to be found here. Maybe positive is a word too far, but I think there's reason for hope that the worst authoritarian instincts that it appeared no institutions would step up and block may be weakening. I think he still had great success in cowing big institutional media, in cowing big universities, in bending the knee of big law. But perhaps there are boundaries that will still hold, and maybe he will simply run out of not only competence, but also time.
Let's get to, as soon as I had that technical issue, let's get to your article, which is the cover story for The New Republic. Everybody's got to read this article. But set it up, this is a years-long strategy and effort by Republicans to redistrict, to partisan gerrymandering, and you've been covering it from the start. This article kind of is a very comprehensive look at much of it, including some great solutions that have been offered by congressional representatives over the years. But take us through kind of where this started with the Republican leadership group, I guess, and Leonard Leo, of course.
What we're watching this summer is an unprecedented midterm. We are watching as Republicans in Texas and North Carolina and Missouri and now Florida and Indiana, many other states are looking at redrawing their congressional maps to give themselves big advantages ahead of the midterm. Democrats have been countering this where they can. Proposition 50 in California is going to essentially allow Democrats to retaliate and gained back the 5 seats that Republicans in Texas have nabbed. And all of this matters so much because control of the House essentially rests on 3 seats. So we are seeing this big skirmishing, this big fighting in the middle of the decade, but that's usually not how it works. Usually we only redistrict once a decade. We redistrict after the census. And I've been chronicling how Republicans for the last 15 years have really understood that there is great power in the ability to control how you draw these district lines. Republicans first really understood this after the 2010 election. And that's what I talk about in Ratf, but which I also go into in this New Republic piece, which is that after the election of Barack Obama in 2008 and the big Democratic wave that it ushered in, right? A Democratic supermajority in the U.S. Senate, as hard to believe those numbers may be now, big Democratic gains nationwide. Republicans understood that as historic as that election was, the 2010 election could be much more consequential. It was a redistricting year, a census year, and all of the lines across the country would be redrawn for state legislatures and for Congress. So Republicans set about essentially understanding how power is won in this country and how the level below sometimes makes the rules for the level above. State legislatures tend to draw the maps for congressional districts. So Republicans set about winning state legislative races in Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Florida, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Indiana, states that Democrats had, sometimes been able to win chambers in. And by winning about 110 state legislative races in those states in 2010, Republicans had the power to control, to dominate redistricting, to give themselves huge advantages in the fight for the U.S. House. And they have kept that advantage now for 15 years. And it's only been enhanced by rulings at this U.S. Supreme Court that have blessed and allowed this and made it that much more difficult for voters to do anything about it. So if you think you're living in a nation in which it is really, really difficult to kick your member of Congress out of office or hold them accountable, you are absolutely right. They draw the lines. They control the process.
It's a very important and one of the most important stories to understand. You've covered the whole history and talked a little bit about the roots of it. But Republicans played the long game. They invested locally while Democrats got caught flat-footed. And part of it, though, is just a simple audacity in my mind, a lack of shame, because this is what's always hobbled Democrats, a certain kind of integrity. Or I think you got this quote in there about wanting to do the right thing versus necessarily the thing that's going to gain power. Republicans are about gaining power no matter what, without shame, lawlessly, one could argue in any number of ways. And as a result, they've been able to take over so many different districts, rewrite those districts, pack courts, and make democracy a lot harder to achieve. And you compare it to, and others do, our democracy is oftentimes in name only. Yes, you feel like you're going to vote, but you're really not represented. You really don't have a chance if you are an urban Republican or a rural Democrat, as you talk about. Tell me a little bit more about how it's a thinly veiled democracy, even before all of these latest redistricting efforts.
Back in 2024, there were 37 districts across the country out of 435 that were within 5 percentage points and basically then competitive. And so that is a democracy in name only right there, when less than 10% of the districts in this nation are competitive. I've never voted in a meaningful congressional race, living in New York and Massachusetts and Connecticut. Even when I lived in Kentucky for a period of time, I lived in the one bright blue district in Kentucky in Louisville. It is we do not have much say. We are allowed to vote, but we are not allowed to vote in elections that generally mean much of anything, where that vote matters. And so much of that is because of way lines have been drawn to ensure that one side or the other wins that seat. And that pushes all of the energy into partisan primaries, which tend to be low turnout affairs. If 7 or 8 people are running in that race because they know that that's the key election to win, you can sometimes win a congressional primary in a non-competitive district with 17, 18% of the vote, and then you cruise into office. And that is how we get extremists representing districts that they don't actually match up with, but who can't actually be defeated. And they go to Washington and they behave like, crazed bomb throwers, as if they have an actual agenda and mandate, but they have neither. And yet, voters can't do much about it. So the time has really come. And I hope that this mid-decade gerrymandering apocalypse, wakes us up to the need for big structural reform. And I think a more proportional House, I try to talk about this a bit in the New Republic piece, as we think about solutions, a more proportional House. And we get that with multi-member districts, larger multi-member districts that we elect members with ranked choice voting. Here in Massachusetts, where we have 9 single-member districts right now, and how you draw those lines makes all the difference. You would have 3 districts of 3, and you would vote with a proportional form of RCV, and you would probably get 6 Democrats statewide, 2 Republicans, maybe 1 independent. If you did this in Tennessee, you'd probably get the opposite. But suddenly you would have Republicans from Massachusetts. You'd have Democrats from Texas. And if you did this in every state, right? If you did this in North Carolina and Missouri, what they're doing right now with mid-decade redistricting wouldn't work. It wouldn't be effective. They could not do it. You would actually have fair, proportional, representative maps from every single state in the nation. I mean, imagine that. All we have to do is pass a law, but we have to start talking about it, and we have to start building the awareness that there is a really easy, simple fix here that could bring a swing district to everybody. And that's the kind of change we so desperately need.
It's really easy, simple fix, except for the politics aren't there for it to be fixed. You talk about this really well. You spell it out at the end of this very important piece that everybody should read that David Daley just wrote, and it's posted for the New Republic. But you talk about how the legislation has been proposed and keeps being proposed. I think Jamie Raskin and another Democratic congressman, they keep proposing what you just said. It's not like it's a David Daley idea. It's a lot of people's idea. It's an idea that would create a far more representative democracy, and that arguably all voters would be more represented. So you could argue that it's in their self-interest. It's in everybody's self-interest. You could make this argument to conservatives. I was thinking about this when I was reading the article, and they would buy it to a huge extent, I think, until they realized that it means they probably wouldn't win as much because of the way that elections and campaigns are run and politics are run and gerrymandering. Like, they can run on these extreme ideas that a very small amount of people hold. And we know this through polling. We know this is true on any number of issues, from guns to the environment to with regulating the financial institutions. A lot of people across the board want the same things, but Republicans keep getting elected and keep passing insane things that are not in the middle class interest, but they're only able to pass these insane conspiratorial things, often for billionaires, because of the way that these districts, I feel, are gerrymandered. Because if you presented these ideas in a more proportional system as prescribed here, I just don't think they would be very popular. I think Democratic ideas like Mamdani's, by the way, and other, Bernie Sanders and AOC's would be far more popular. And that's why they don't want and have always needed to minimize democracy in people's vote, because most people don't agree with them. That's what I'm trying to say. They're not popular, their ideas, unless they make it very hard for you to vote.
I don't disagree with a lot that you said there, but I think that big change can happen. Big change can happen quickly and dramatically in a moment of crisis. Sometimes windows open when we least expect them. I don't think anybody imagined, for example, that, same-sex marriage would happen so quickly in this country as it did back in the last decade. So sometimes windows open when we least expect them, and perhaps a maximally gerrymandered map that is gerrymandered nationwide wakes everybody up to the need for big change. Now, this has to start with voters wanting it and voters demanding it. And I think that as we hit this point in which, California is going to be a 48-4 Democratic map, where Indiana right now is talking about a 9-0 Republican map, just wiping the other side off the board. We can't keep wiping the other side off the board. We have to find a way to talk to one another and live together. And so how are we going to do this? Maybe after we have wiped the other side completely off the board, everywhere that they can be wiped off the board, we can sit down and start to have a conversation about, okay, now what are we going to do next? We will have fought fire with fire, every place we can fight fire with fire. And then maybe we can realize it's going to take a little bit of water to do this as well. And what is that going to look like? The current kind of Republicans, no, I don't think they could get elected under a system like this. Well, that's not true. I think they'd be able to get elected, but I think they'd get elected in proportion to their number. They are a piece of the Republican Party. They are not all of the Republican Party. And right now they are overrepresented because of gerrymandered single-member districts. But if you could have more Republicans from California, if you could have more Republicans from Massachusetts, from Connecticut, doesn't that begin the process of pulling the party back towards a more sensible place? At some point, that has to happen. One would hope, one would think. I know we've been saying this for a long time, but if it's going to happen, it's going to take different electoral structures and incentives.
Let's also, though, talk about the Supreme Court, which you often reference in this article and throughout your work, because they are the reason also how we got here. You talked about the Republican leadership, organization that started these grassroots efforts.
Leadership Committee, yes, the RSLC.
To get Republicans elected at the state level, which allows them control over all of this. But at the same time, Leonard Leo, you talk about as much as anybody, have done great reporting on him and the Federalist Society. They helped pack the Supreme Court with their guys. John Roberts, historically antithetical to voting rights. We've talked a lot about that. Guts Section 5 Voting Rights Act. Now Section 2 is up to be gutted. Likely it looks, based on the arguments, that that's exactly what they'll decide. And he also basically, you talk about how he played the long game and at times tried to save face and look like an institutionalist, like maintaining these black districts and voting against that in Alabama, I think it was. But basically, when his whole idea is, well, just send it back to Congress, and it's up to the legislative branch to do this. But he does this knowing that they're not going to make these decisions, and so he's playing the long game. Talk a little bit about the Supreme Court's role in this, specifically John Roberts. As we look towards, I think also, isn't there a big argument next week?
Republicans have played a brilliant long game, and all of these pieces work together, and they are knotted. And the more you pull on them, the tighter the knots get. The combination of gerrymandered districts and a Supreme Court that has been itself set up for long-term Republican gains is one that has really worked hand in hand. So when, for example, you have gerrymandered state legislatures across the South, and then you do what the Chief Justice did in the Shelby County case in 2013, and you end preclearance and you allow those states to do whatever they want when it comes to voting rules, you are handing that power back to a whiter, more conservative, more rural, more deeply right-wing group of lawmakers who are more than happy to roll back the clock and use these old school voter suppression methods and stuff the old poisons back into new bottles. And, John Roberts gave them that authority. When in 2019, just as voters nationwide were waking up to the importance of redistricting reform, and we're winning that reform all over the country. John Roberts in the Common Cause versus Rucho case says, well, you can't use the federal courts anymore. This decision arrived at a time in which federal judges appointed by presidents of both parties looked at gerrymanders drawn by both parties, by Democrats in Maryland, by Republicans in North Carolina, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, and said, we are the only thing that can stop this, because when lawmakers are entrenched, they have no reason to stop this. And John Roberts said, no, let people figure it out through the political process, knowing full well that the political process could not fix this problem, that Congress could not fix this problem. And so here we are. As soon as John Roberts did that, all of these gerrymandered legislatures knew that no one would stop them if they went ahead in 2021 and drew wild maps, and that there's no one to stop them now in 2025 when they go ahead and do these unprecedented mid-decade redraws. So this court owns and ought to be ashamed of how it has turned its back on the American people, on what it has done for voters. If they had that shame, if this was not actually the very reason that they were put in these places to begin with. This is the goal of it all, is turning the Supreme Court into a right-wing super legislature. And that has been achieved, right? And that's, one reason why we have to be really, really concerned, even as we look at this crack up of the MAGA coalition, even as we look ahead to what's coming down the line in 2028 as they begin to fight each other for control once Trump leaves the stage. This court is still going to be here. This court's going to be here for some time, and they are the true fount of Republican political power.
Do you know the journalist, writer, labor journalist, author named Stephen Greenhouse?
I do.
He has a piece in The Guardian that I read today that's titled, John Roberts has badly weakened our democracy. Will he ever stand up to Trump? And he does a good job laying out all the transgressions, which you've done throughout your career and Roberts' tenure. But his piece hinges on basically, it's not too late for Roberts.
Oh, God. Not another person making this argument that John Roberts might save us. I mean, how many times do we have to watch John Roberts not save us before? And I have great admiration for Mr. Greenhouse and his labor writing at the Times. But, I'm over this idea that John Roberts is going to ride to our rescue. John Roberts has been acting for 40 years like he is some sort of moderate, reasonable institutionalist. And really smart people, especially in the media, continue to believe this BS myth that is what he is. He has shown us what he is in his decisions time and again. If John Roberts had any concerns about what he had done in Shelby County, he's had 12 years now in different cases to try and address them and roll it back. John Roberts isn't concerned about it. This is John Roberts' life's work. John Roberts got onto the court saying he was going to be calling balls and strikes. He calls balls and strikes based on which team is at the plate. John Roberts is not the Chief Justice of the United States. John Roberts is the most effective Republican politician and political operative of his generation and almost any other generation. When you look at how far he has moved this court and the Constitution on big, crucial issues on which the country is not on his side. And I'm talking about the regulatory state. I'm talking about whether or not a president is king. I'm talking about voting rights. We're talking about the environment, guns, time and abortion. Time and again, John Roberts has shown us who he is. He is not going to save us.
Sir, the question was, would you like super salad? I don't know what that John Roberts.
This is a Wendy's. And I am ranting about John Roberts. This is why I don't get invited to many parties, Pete.
Love it. I literally think that's going to be a clip that I'm going to put out because you're exactly right. But just to finish what Greenhouse's only argument was not anything about democracy or voting, which I don't think he or anybody thinks anything is going to change that. specifically he's talking about, would he rule with other conservatives on the court that the administration and our commander-in-chief violated the law in imposing emergency tariffs. So the tariff case, that's how he's saying, Roberts, it's not too late, because that's such a big deal, that case. But
the tariff case, who knows, right? Because that's one of those cases where it's Trump up against big business. So John Roberts has to decide who's really my daddy, the Chamber of Commerce or Big Don. And so I could see how on that case, perhaps maybe he'll just choose rich daddy instead of authoritarian daddy.
Well, I think the only reason I think that people are saying that is because of what we talked about earlier with the crack up of the party. Maybe John Roberts doesn't want to stay on the side of rich daddy / pedophile. They might want to save their own legacy by not standing up for this guy who's, maybe littered throughout the Epstein files, doing horrific thing, which could lead to a lot more Republicans doing something similar to Rich Daddy and going back to their more conservative principles and not necessarily authoritarian leaders' whims in the middle of the night.
John Roberts has shown us who he is for the last 20 years. John Roberts is a Republican in robes. These guys ought to be like NASCAR. They ought to have to actually have their votes and the people who pay for their vacations on patches on their robes. We got to stop talking about them as justices and start talking about them as what they really are. Politicians appointed for life to positions in which their decisions are non-reviewable. They have no ethics code. We need big-time Supreme Court reform, and we have to give up this idea that John Roberts and any of these justices are riding to the rescue of democracy. We are only going to save ourselves. They are not going to do this for us.
Well said, and I fully agree. There's no reason to think otherwise.
You got me fired up. It's like I've had some of this Trump vodka or something.
Nah, man, I'm always glad you're fired up in this way, because I just think if everybody has read your books and articles, the reason why I always keep coming back to you, you're the journalist on this. And not only do you understand all the nooks and crannies in the history of much of it, all of it, but your passion about the injustice in the way that you explain it, I always love it. So I'm here for it. But speaking of which, what is the state of play here at the end, where we're at? Because I do believe next week they're going to take a look at, Supreme Court's going to take a look at the Texas redistricting case, probably going to side with Texas, I think you said in that article. But
yeah.
And you really do a great job, and it's a better read than I suppose talked about, laying out the lay of the land, how each state has gotten to where they've gotten to. But where does this leave us? How much is up in the air between now and November 26?
It's still the second inning of the game, so it's really difficult to look at the scoreboard. The scoreboard is going to keep changing. And it's going to keep changing as the courts weigh in and as additional states weigh in. But Republicans have more possibility and more opportunity. So at this California's map that gives the Democrats 5 seats is still live, and the Republican map has been paused by a lower federal court and will be reviewed by the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, I don't know what the U.S. Supreme Court will do, but I can look at what the U.S. Supreme Court has done in every other voting rights case for the last 15 years in which the thumb has been on the scale for the Republican Party, and I can be extraordinarily doubtful that they won't find a way to say, yes, this is a map that's about partisanship and not a map about race. So I fully expect that California and Texas will counteract each other. So then the question becomes what happens from there. Democrats are going to gain a seat in Utah off of the new map that's in place. Republicans have already taken a seat in Missouri, a seat in North Carolina. They're at work as we speak on a map in Indiana that will take an additional 2 seats. There's a new map in Ohio that adds probably 2 seats. So that gets you to 6. Florida, likely to go next. Ron DeSantis says he can get anywhere from 3 to 5 off of that map. I think 3 is high, but probably as much as he could get. So I think you could That could get you to 8 or 9. New Hampshire could still go. Kansas was about to go. Press the pause button. We'll see what they really do in January. And Kentucky could still go. So that's in the ballpark of 10 to 11 seats that Republicans could pick up via partisan gerrymandering. I don't see a lot of additional options for Democrats. Virginia's been talking tough. I don't think they can get it past voters. There's a lawsuit in New York. I don't think that's going to go anywhere. It's a real Hail Mary. But then there's the second piece of this. And I'm sorry I'm talking too long, but the second piece of this goes back to John Roberts in the U.S. Supreme Court. And there is a case about racial gerrymandering that the court heard last month, and I expect the decision to come down some point in January. This is the Calais case out of Louisiana, and it has to do with the question of whether or not it's constitutional to draw majority-minority opportunity districts that protect the rights of Black and Latino communities to have representation. If the court finds essentially that the rest of Section 2 is not constitutional, it could open up the potential that Georgia, South Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee could all next year draw new maps that wipe seats currently held by Black Democrats off the map. Stacey Abrams' group Fair Fight says this is as many as 12 to 19 seats. The Democrats don't have any answer for that. So the state of play is we are in this moment in which the most recent poll of the generic congressional ballot that asks people, would you vote for a Democrat or Republican next year? Democrats suddenly have what's close to a double-digit lead, which is dramatic. It's stunning. It's the kind of lead that ordinarily one would point to and say, that's the potential of a big wave. But if they have to counteract a dozen seats gained through partisan gerrymandering and a dozen seats gained through racial gerrymandering, in addition to the 3 they have to take anyway that they're behind by now, it's a very difficult road given how few competitive districts are left in the country. Not saying it's impossible, but that number is very difficult.
Really important to stay on top of your reporting. Nobody covers it better. So keep reading and following David. Where are you mostly posting daily? On Threads, Blue Sky?
Yeah, I'm over on Blue Sky most of the time. I'm Dave Daley over there. You can find me over there. And this new piece in the New Republic is exciting. And Anti-Democratic is now out in paperback wherever it is you buy your books, ideally at a local bookstore or from bookshop.org, and not from that big behemoth, but it's everywhere.
I think that your 3 books, Unrigged, Rat Fucked, and Anti-Democratic, should be on the bookcase of anybody who cares about America and democracy. Like, they tell the story as well as anybody has told it. And it's so important. This new piece is very comprehensive. Everybody should go read it and then share it. Share it everywhere so that it gets a lot of attention and clicks. And we'll talk to David at least every month and anytime there are new developments on this. And stay in the fight. Be involved. There are solutions. The end of your article lays them out. And they're not your ideas specifically. They're, Jamie Raskin proposing these ideas in the Congress. So really potentially huge possibilities, not tomorrow, as you say, but, after the next census, especially. And that matters because we should play the fucking long game and not live in a world of instant gratification all the time, especially when it comes to democracy, especially when it comes, like, you can't just punch out and be cynical and not be involved, because then, what are you doing? What is your purpose? The apathy can't be the answer. Cynicism can't be the answer, which is why there is light at the end of the tunnel. I always believe that. I know you do too. I'll shut up. Thank you.
Very grateful for you, Pete. Thanks again for the time that you always give me and all of these issues that seem so wonky, but no, they are important. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Daley, there he goes. Go read that article at The New Republic. Go get his books, all of them. You should have them all, and we all should, and so should all of your friends, and so on. Follow him on Blue Sky. Let him know that you heard him here. That matters, and I appreciate it. And now, little bonus segment. If you're not doing anything, you want to keep listening, I had a really great conversation with a super smart woman who has got a very popular YouTube channel now. She's popular on social media. She used to work at Al Jazeera and the Young Turks, and now she's doing her own thing. I got to know her through our friend Wajahat Ali, who she appears with on a pretty regular basis. And I was real happy that she invited me on her show, and I invited her on mine. I think she's going to hopefully join me on Thursday, and we'll probably be live as well. But this is Francesca Fiorentini. Her show is The Bituation Room. You should subscribe to all of her stuff. It's real good. So go give her YouTube channel a like and a subscription right now. You can follow her on Instagram, where she also has a big following, at Franny Fio. But we had a lot of fun, and again, a better watch than maybe to listen, because we were doing all kinds of things, for the camera, having fun, making fun of Kash Patel and other stuff. But I thought this was a pretty great conversation. I made a few good points I don't usually make, and she, as always, does a great job. Let's do it right now at the Bituation Room. The audio from it, you can go watch us at her YouTube channel. Here we go.
But Pete, we start the show out in the same way, which is we like to bitch about things. And I will say I did wake up this morning and I immediately Googled high-speed rail in California because I'm tired of waiting. And apparently tracks are going to be starting to be laid next year. Not holding my breath. But I fucking did that drive from LA to San Francisco, which I used to do no sweat. Oh man, I would do that drive 5.5, bam, 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 bam. But now I'm old and my back hurts. Yeah. And fucking sit there for that long. And I have to get out and stretch and pee. And I'm just like, I don't have it anymore. And I just want an hour and a half or 2 hour, 3 hour. I'll even take a 3 hour train ride up to see my family.
I mean, there are a lot of trade-offs, I guess, living in the most beautiful place. One of them being that you're not in it enough. You're in a damn car, which is why I have such a hard time with it. But yeah, there's plenty to complain about, as always. So
what are you bitching about?
Stupid people. Ooh. And I'm so tired that everybody thinks they're smart. I'm dumb. I'm a dummy. The only reason I have any measure of intelligence or any following or any career is because my whole thing has been, I'm a dummy, but I'm smart enough to find a person who knows what they're talking about and have them on my show.
Oh, yeah.
That's I have
12 years.
I mean, I've been doing it for almost 15 years. I've been interviewing every day. I've been interviewing experts. That's the whole thing. Because when I started out in radio, there was very few progressive radio hosts that had much success. I was at the Daly Show at the time as the fluffer, the warm-up comedian. And I was like, how about I do the Daly Show on the radio? So I tried to be that guy. But the key was, this is my success and still is, the one thing that hasn't changed in the iterations, is I interview smart people. Yeah. And they really know what they're talking about in a specific range of issues, like virologists or climate scientists or tax policy experts. And I'm tired of people thinking that they're all those things. They're none of them. I'm like, I did my own research. You don't do research. You're an electrician, which is awesome. If I have any electrical issues, I'm definitely going to reach out. But you don't know how to conduct a randomized controlled study on anything. So stop talking to me